Alrighty, guys. Welcome to tonight's charting session. Hopefully, you guys have had a good weekend. It is Sunday, August 20th. Welcome. Tonight, we're going to be going over a little bit of the price action to get us ready for this week, talking about where I'm expecting price to go, what was my bias going into the week, talking a little bit about news we could possibly expect as well, just kind of overall market conditions to really get us ready. And then any questions you guys have, again, feel free to just let them out, ask away. And we'll get ready for this week. So first thing I want to go over, let's just do a little bit of top-down analysis on NQ and ES, and I'm still going to have that same bias that we've been talking about the last 2 weeks now, which is I still think the draw is going to be this weekly fair value gap that we have. So looking on NQ on the weekly time frame, first of all, is these equal highs we've been talked about have now been swept. We're getting strong moves to the downside, nice displacement. I think that these equal lows right here, as well as this weekly fair value gap, is going to become the draw on liquidity. I still think that we have lower to go. This is where I'm aiming. But again, one of the things that I want to pay attention to is the way I like to think about the market and where I like to think about how my bias is what has to happen first, right? On a smaller time frame, what needs to happen first for us to go here, right? What's the best possible entry or best possible place that I could get, a good trade that market has to go to first before going here. So looking at the daily, first thing I'm noticing is we do have two daily fair value gaps. We have one right here that we're starting to come back into a little bit. And then we also have this one up here. Now zooming into a 4-hour, you can see whether we're in this kind of 4-hour fair value gap right now. We just rejected off of it a little bit in this wick. We're starting to come up in price. A lot of my bias that's going to be going into tomorrow is going to depend on what happens in the overnight session. But I do want to mark out this little high right here because this is that point that goes into that 4-hour fair or that daily fair value gap. Sorry. So that's what I'm going to be watching going into tomorrow. Now we do have a long ways to go to get there. We do around 270 points, but that could be a place that we possibly see us look to rebound, bounce there, and then go back lower, right? Now we could just respect this and start to sell back off, but I need to see price actually validate that first, right? So if we do end up going into tomorrow and I can see this fair value gap get ran through in the overnight session, then I'm going to be bullish going into the morning, expecting this high to become the draw on liquidity. So the biggest thing I'm watching for going into the overnight session is this 4-hour fair value gap that we have. If this gets ran through to the upside, I would expect us to continue to the upside in this high to become the draw on liquidity, and I will be bullish going into the morning. But right now, we do want to pay attention to this as well. We just now swept this 1-hour high that we have here. Now, market just gapped up a little bit now that Sunday price has now opened. We're starting to kind of, crunch a little bit to the upside. So maybe we could be a little bit of a short setup in the overnight. We'll see if we get that displacement to the downside. But right now, kind of price is sort of chopping up to the upside, has taken that high. Notice we haven't really gotten any follow through this level yet. So we absolutely could start to see displacement back down. So that's a possibility. But the biggest thing I'm watching for is this area here, right? So going into tomorrow, we absolutely could still come back up and then look to see displacement. If we end up going into the morning and price, continues to come up a little bit, let's say we're here, I could still possibly be short here, right? The only way I'm going to be bullish is if we can get a big push and we get displacement through that level, invalidating that bearish fair value gap on the 4-hour, right? If we can invalidate this, then I could expect to come up to this high, right? But if we don't, I could absolutely expect us to still go back down. So something I'm watching for is if we continue to the upside in the overnight session, I'm going to be looking to see strong displacement to the downside. So let's say we wake up tomorrow, price is right here. I want to see strong moves to the downside, right? If then we can get that, that's going to validate my short bias. I wait for a bigger time frame market structure shift because, again, this is a 15-minute time frame. So I'm using that bigger time frame bias to validate those shorts first, and then that's when we can zoom in and look at that 5-minute and see where we can, we can really get the best entry possible to validate that short setup, right? Now, if we wake up tomorrow and let's come up, swept internal and already started to sell off and market opens here, then I could possibly expect a draw on liquidity to now be sell side, right? But I need to see some internal structure to take, a short setup, right? So the reason I like the chart right now kind of is we have a 15-minute bias so far, right? We have this 15-minute high. We have this nice little 4-hour fair value gap. If we can get displacement to the downside on the 15-minute, that's when I get to zoom into that 5-minute, look for possible internal buy side to be swept, and then look to take a continuation short to the downside. Now, I'm hoping we don't get any of this action going into tomorrow because this action, Friday's action was really messy. I didn't really like anything that on Friday. I didn't end up taking any trades. So hopefully we can get some cleaner action going into next week and see what happens. Let's take a look at news going into this week. I haven't checked yet. We'll see. Monday, we're good. We don't really have anything. Tuesday, not really anything either. Wednesday, we have PMI at 9:45, so 15 minutes after the open. We'll probably be waiting for that first before taking anything. Thursday, we have unemployment claims, pre-market. FOMC member speaks at 12. That's not really anything I worry about. And then Friday, we do have Powell speaking. So that's going to be a big thing. So Friday is really the biggest news day that we have going into next week. Going to be very cautious going into Friday, knowing that we have a lot of FOMC members speaking, and then we have the man Powell himself speaking at 10:05. So that's going to be something that we want to pay attention to 30 minutes after the open, 35 minutes after the open. We do want to be cautious, looking to take any sort of trades. I definitely will not be taking any sort of trades during this time. I want to wait for Powell to speak, wait for that early volatility to come in, and then see where price wants to go after that to really take any sort of, high quality setup. So not a lot of news going into this week. Pretty much the only thing that I really see affecting price is going to be Powell on Friday. So let's take a look at ES here. Same thing on ES. We've now come up, swept that 15-minute. Notice we have no follow-through yet. Looking to see if we get displacement back to the downside. Looking at that 4-hour, keep in mind we have swept this low here. We absolutely could start to see possibly displacement back to the upside. And if I'm being honest, this chart does look like we might want to have a little bit of a relief bounce, possibly going to discount of this range, maybe coming back to that high. So that same thing on NQ is going to be the same thing I'm watching for here on ES. That daily fair value gap is what I'm going to be watching here. Now, again, we do have this daily fair value gap, but I would like to see us come back to this because that is going to be discount of this first leg that we really had, strong momentum to the downside. Because if we're looking at this 4-hour here, when we really started to get that selling pressure, notice we have, we're starting to sell off, but there's not any really strong selling pressure. This was the last high that we put in before we really started to get that selling starting to come in. So I would like to see us possibly go back to discount of this range. That's why I like that 4-hour or that daily fair value gap and this little high right here acting as buy side. So this is where I would like to see price possibly go back to validate a nice little rebound in price action, redistributing price back to discount and then possibly looking to go back lower towards that weekly draw on liquidity, right? Because we're always focused on what has to happen first before we get the draw. Now, we could absolutely reject here and still go lower, right? That's why we're looking to see the reaction in price. But for right now, a lot of my bias going into tomorrow is going to depend on what happens in the overnight session. But I'm going to continue to be bearish. My overall bias this week is going to continue to be bearish just because I do think the draw on liquidity is that weekly fair value gap still. So we'll see what happens going into tomorrow, and we'll see what happens in the overnight session. So I do want to take a look at gold. I have been liking gold recently, so let's take a look. Starting off on the daily. Noticing daily, not really super clean action, just kind of been slowly selling off to the downside. I do probably think that the draw does become this low, but again, we could possibly see us go back to discount of this range. So again, I'm not going to be bullish until price shows me that I need to be bullish, right? So right now, we've just been continuing to sell off, so I'm expecting the exact same thing to continue to happen. So what am I watching for? We have these nice little highs here. Would like to see us come up and sweep this 15-minute high here that we have and possibly look to sell off. If we end up breaking through this high with nice displacement, I could expect the draw on liquidity to become this high here. And then again, I'll be looking for the same thing. Looking to see sweep of liquidity, displacement to the downside, fair value gap, and then we could look to possibly take a short setup on gold. So I am bullish on gold. I would like to see this high get swept, and then I will continue to be bearish. I do think the draw overall time frame is going to be the low, but I would like to see us come up, take this 15-minute high, and then look to sell back off to get the best possible trade that we could take here. Let's take a look at YM here as well. Clear up the charts a little bit here. Let me just clear everything. YM is looking a little choppy. We did just sweep this high here, and now starting to displace to the downside. Keep in mind, though, weekly time frame, that might just become low resistance liquidity run, right? That's something we want to pay attention to as well. Starting to come up. Notice we get back to discount of that range. Actually, I don't think we did actually. Yeah, definitely not. But we are starting to get displacement. If we do continue to bounce to the upside, I would expect us to probably see new highs. But for now, I'm going to continue to be bearish. I do believe this low will become the draw on liquidity, and I do believe that this is where we're going to go. So zooming in, start on the daily first. Where could we expect price to retrace to? Number one, we do have that daily fair value gap right here. Could come back up to that, look to reject and go lower. That's where I'd like to see an internal model start to form. Looking at the 4 hour, we have another nice little fair value gap right here on the 4 hour that aligns with that daily time frame as well. So that is going to be where I'm looking for a price on YM to go back to and then continue to the downside. Possibly, if we do end up breaking through this area, we could expect to come to this high and then sweep and possibly go back lower. But pretty much everything I'm looking at right now, I am continually going to be bearish on going into this week. But we could see a little bit more upside early on in the week before selling back off later in the week. I do want to check DXY. Oh. Starting off on that weekly. So weekly time frame, we just ended up taking these equal highs here. If we end up running through this, I could expect the draw to be this high. But right now we're looking to see displacement to the downside, right? DXY for me is gonna be a little bit more bearish, but we absolutely could continue. Notice we haven't really gotten that displacement yet to the downside. So going into this week, notice we just swept that internal level here. I'm looking to see DXY start to have some selling pressure to the downside to then possibly continue lower as well. So looking on the daily, we do have this daily fair value gap. This could now be a draw as well if we get displacement to the downside. So that's what I'm expecting on DXY. If we do get break of structure, looking at a 4 hour, noticing we have some lows built up here. Notice this looks like it would become low resistance liquidity run. So what would I possibly expecting? Looking to see displacement to the downside and end up going back to that daily fair value gap, possibly this becoming a breaker or something, like that. But I need to see displacement back down to the downside first before having a strong bias to the downside. Any questions? Can you go over a long I took entry 12:30 on the 1 minute on Friday on ES? Yeah, let's check it out. I'm guessing it was right here. Came back. Did we reach discount of this range? We did. Internal got some nice displacement. Not really super clear break of structure, but you do get that fair value gap. Enter here. Guessing you'd be targeting these equal highs. Never ended up actually tapping that and then coming back down. Then we ended up coming back later. Did you put your PT here? And did you scale anything or no? One tick off. Gotcha. Okay, so looking at a bigger time frame. Again, I do think that this becomes the draw. That's not a bad trade, but it is a little bit lower probability just because we didn't retrace back to discount of this range yet. Notice that this move that we ended up selling off was to go back to discount of this range before actually taking that overall bigger time frame draw, right? This was going to be the draw. Once we end up breaking through that 15-minute fair value gap that we were watching, right? I expect this to become inverse. Again, noticing what's being respected, what's being disrespected. If we want to go lower, then this needs to get respected, right? But notice we end up running right through this, so that gives me confidence that the draw is going to be here. But when we end up coming up, it doesn't always mean that we're going to go straight to this level, right? It doesn't always mean that. That's why the highest quality setups is when we can get that pullback to discount, see the respect of that inverse or respect of that fair value gap, and then look to take that trade, right? So notice we end up coming up and then pulling back to discount of this range right here with that wick, and then get that bought up, and then we get that push to buy side. Now, the 1 minute, it's not a bad trade. You use that bigger time frame bias, pull back to fair value gap, pull back to discount, wait for displacement to the upside, fair value gap. It's not a bad long. I would look to scale at least something. Now, I look to scale at least like 25% of your position somewhere here, and then put your stop to break even. It's just, this is unfortunate that you just kind of got missed out on one tick here, but if I'm being honest, like we went over before, if I'm being honest, Friday didn't really see a lot of clean opportunity for me, and I wouldn't really have even taken this long. The reason is because we ended up forming equal lows, right? And a lot of my rules, I don't like taking any sort of trade unless those equal lows or equal highs are taken out beforehand. So when we get this equal low put in, and then we get a bounce to the upside, and then we pull back to discounted fair value gap, and then get bought up to this buy side level, I still probably would not have taken that long just because we had equal lows. But again, that's not a bad setup. I think we were forming SMT, but I don't really like taking SMTs when we have equal lows. Yeah, this would not be a market structure shift. This would not be structure shift. Yeah, I don't think this is a valid short at all. The reason is because, again, on a bigger time frame, draw still higher. We come up, don't take that high, which makes it even less probability that we didn't take any sort of buy side level. And this market structure shift to the net, this would not be structure shift because we have no displacement through this low. Now, this would be your structure shift, but that's if those highs were taking. So this is a lucky trade in my opinion. There's a really nice long at 140 on NQ. Wondering what you thought about it. Didn't take it, but it looked like A+. Let's check it out. 140. Yeah, so this was the same area on ES and NQ. So this is where ES made those equal lows, I'm pretty sure. Let's see. Yeah, so ES made equal lows here. That's the reason I wouldn't have taken it. It's a good setup, but it's just a rule I have that whenever we form equal lows, a lot of the times I just won't touch it until those lows are taken or those highs are taken, whatever it is. You can see though NQ did end up forming kind of an SMT. Now again, I like to think SMTs for me aren't very valid unless we're actually forming a higher low and a lower low. But since ES never took that low, to me that's not a valid SMT. It just still ended up working out though. But just a little bit lower probability. Very picky. Yeah, nice internal model. You get sell side, you got a nice displacement, you pull back to fair value gap, looking to see buy side. Looks good. Nice little internal model for sure. Oh, yeah, that's the one I already looked at. Yeah, so this is the one we went over. Again, it's not bad, but just for me personally, it's just a little bit against my rules. Again, the reason I do like this though, and the thing it's not bad, is because you get a nice displacement of the upside. The SMT with NQ, you do have the higher low put in, and you do get that internal sweep. So this would be right looking to see this pullback. Once you see this, right, this is the best entry possible, right? Because once you come up and put this equal low in, or these lows, notice this low doesn't come back to discount. So we end up forming higher, and then we get a pullback to sweep that internal low, pull back to discount of that overall range, and then that's when we start to get that bought up, right? That's the best possible entry you could get right there after that low gets swept right there. So that's beautiful, brother. Yeah, we can check euro. Clear up the charts a bit here. Euro's just been chopping. All right. So notice euro did just take sell side. So could start to see displacement to the upside, possibly head back, maybe even to this high. But for me to validate that this is the draw, I need to see a lot of displacement starting to go to the upside here, right? So I'm going to continue to be bearish until I start getting displacement. Now, I do believe that this looks like it wants to become low resistance liquidity run. Do we have any on a daily? We don't really. We do have that daily fair value gap. Possibly come back to here as well. But for me to validate that that is the draw, I need to see some sort of high, like here or here, get broken through with a lot of displacement, right? Because what we could expect to see is possibly this. We get a nice move to the upside, and then we look to pull back to some sort of fair value gap. And then that's where we look for that internal model to then go to the upside, right? Because we use that bigger time frame bias. Once we get that 4-hour push to the upside, right, then that's when we zoom in and say, hey, you know, we have a 1 hour or 4 hour fair value gap here. Once we pull back to that fair value gap, that is when I look for internal model, right? That's when I zoom into a 15-minute. I'm like, hey, now we're looking for internal model. This is exactly what I'm looking for. Pull back. Let's say we have a low put in. We start to chop, and then we sweep that low, and then we get displacement to the upside. That's the best possible long that we could take, right? Is when we get that internal model inside of that. Do you see Mondays as retrace / manipulation move for power of 3 on the weekly candle, for example? If you're expecting a bearish week, would it be reasonable to expect a retrace higher before a weekly sell-off? Is that a general question, or is that a specific question for this week? Because generally, again, you don't really know. I mean, in my opinion, I go into every week, expecting something new, and I think that's the best way to go about it. But you could absolutely expect power of 3 if you're just, reading that based off price action. Is the reason you want big displacement with market structure shift because if we had small displacement through, it would just be sweep? Exactly. Hussein, if the draw is that on a bigger time frame, that it's all overlapping models. So if we're looking for a 1 hour, since we just swept a daily, right? This is a daily sell side level or a 4 hour sell side level. That means I would look to see a valid structure shift and to give me more confidence if I saw displacement on a 4 hour, right? Now a 1 hour could give me that, but 4 hour is what I would really want to see. Yeah, we can go over CL as well. So CL is actually not looking too bad. We just did take that 1 hour high looking at the daily. We did not take that daily low yet. We did just take this wick low, but I would like to see us go back lower. We actually just tapped into this daily. CL looks really good, actually. CL looks really, really good. I am bearish on CL. I would like to see that low get taken and possibly come back to discount of this range. Looking at the 4 hour, let's see if we had any manipulation move. Not really. Maybe on a 1 hour. Yeah, it's not super clear where I would put standard deviation here. So I would like to see this low get taken though. I would like to see us go lower. We just did sweep that 15-minute high here. So what I would be watching for is I would looking to see displacement through these lows here. No, not really. If there's equal lows on ES or NQ, the SMT is going to be less valid for me. Because the way I like to think about it is, guys, equal lows and equal highs are always going to be targeted for liquidity, right? That's always going to be an area that's going to be targeted, and equal lows and equal highs most of the time will always get taken out before the move is had. So a lot of the times I like to see it. It gives me more confidence knowing that those equal lows are taken beforehand versus afterhand, right? Like for example, if we look at ES at the open on Friday, or was it NQ? I think it was NQ actually. Or yeah, wait here. No, it was ES. Sorry. Yeah, looking at ES here, right? We put in these equal lows here. Notice when the move actually happened. Notice when we got bought back up. I'm not looking to take any longs here until these equal lows are taken, because I know this is where liquidity is resting. This is where sell side's resting, as at these equal lows. When we put these equal lows and then we continue to bounce, notice price doesn't tell me that we're ready to bounce yet. Now, a lot of the time, the best possible trades are going to happen once this gets taken. Notice, right when we take this level, boom, taken. No more downside follow through. We immediately get bought back up. You get displacement to the upside, and then that is when our long model starts to play out. We get a pullback to a discounted fair value gap. We get bought up, and we go straight to buy side, right? After those equal lows are swept. So a lot of the time, I want to see equal lows or equal highs get taken first before I enter something. Was that right? That was right now, Hansen, wasn't it? Looks good. A little bit more risky because you're playing overnight session, but not too bad. I like the scaling out, scaling in. Yeah, so we can go over to the NQ trade on Friday. So whoever was in the live when we took this trade on Friday, I was very confident with this, and I pretty much called exactly what was going to happen after it happened. So let's talk about why. So first thing, going into the morning, right? Going into Friday, I was looking for this. This fair value gap is going to give me my buys. If we reject, we go lower. If we go through this, we go higher, right? This is what I'm watching. This 15-minute fair value gap. If we reject this, I expect us to go make new lows. If we break through this, I'm expecting us to go to this high, right? So I zoom in, looking at market open. Right when this high gets taken, notice NQ ends up coming up. We're starting to chop. We form equal highs. We end up coming up. Boom. We come up right when I see this wick. And we get no follow through. Notice we're still respecting that fair value gap. I'm automatically thinking what is going to happen after this. Now we notice, right? Once buy side's taken, especially when we're in a bearish trend like this, I always expect that we're going to go back to sell side. So that means what? A lot of the time, people are more bearish here or more bullish here than bearish. And the reason is you should not be. A lot of people were telling me when we were right here that we should be taking longs. And exactly what I said is this fair value gap is going to get ran through to the downside. I said we're going to get ran through to the downside. It's going to act as inverse, and we're going to go see sell side. Now, what do I need to see for me to take this trade? For it to be a high-quality setup, I need to see the sweep of liquidity, break a structure, or invalidation of fair value gap, and then I take my trade on some sort of bearish fair value gap, right? So we come up. Once I see this fair value gap get ran through, this is my validation. This is my confirmation that sell side's now going to be met, right? Because if we're bullish and we're bearish, what needs to happen, right? If we're bullish right now, that means this is going to hold. Notice, this does not hold. So I'm very bearish once this fair value gap gets ran through to the downside. Notice, we come down, we pull back to this, respect it as an inverse fair value gap, and then we get that sell off to the downside. We can see we put in a bearish fair value gap right here, and then that is where I took shorts. Pulled back to this fair value gap. I entered shorts, stop up here, targeting new lows. I took off. I was in 3 contracts. I took off 2 at this low, and then I left a runner to go down here, and then my last contract got stopped at break even. But this was a very good trade. I was very confident with this trade. The reason I don't wait for discount here is because we're trading on a 5-minute model. Look at this high that got swept, right? This high is a 5-minute, 1-minute high, right? Now, if I'm looking at a 15-minute, which is what we normally trade, 15, 30-minute highs, I need to see pullback to discount on a 5-minute and then look for a 1-minute internal model. But since this is a 5-minute high, I'm not going any lower in time frames to, see us pull back to discount. This is all I need to enter short. And I expect all these lows to become low resistance. Let's say we have a daily fair value gap, and in that daily fair value gap, we have a 4-hour fair value gap, and in that 4-hour, we have a 1-hour. On top of that, a 1-minute fair value gap is a stronger area to get respected. Yes, absolutely. That's exactly how I look at how I do top down analysis. Absolutely. If we have a daily fair value gap, I'm always going to zoom into a 4-hour and see if that 4-hour is a smaller area, and then go to a 30-minute, see if that 30-minute, and you'll notice that those fair value gaps, when you dig deeper and deeper into what those are going to be the areas that are going to be respected the most. All right, guys. Any last questions for tonight? Pretty much all I have for you guys going into tomorrow. Will be interesting to see what happens this week and see what happens in the overnight session. Snipe us the CL tomorrow. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if oil gets that displacement or not. But CL does not look bad at all. Definitely could see that setup tomorrow. All right, guys. Can you give a goodnight kiss? Mwah. All right, guys. Enjoy the rest of your night. I will see you all tomorrow morning. I will set my alarm. I will make sure it's plugged in. Enjoy the rest of your night, guys. Peace.